नमस्सर्वेभ्यः। ऐऐटि मद्रास् संस्थायाः अङ्गभूतायाः संस्कृतसमितेः आश्रये प्रवर्तमानानि मुद्राराक्षसमधिकृत्य प्रवचनानि अनुवर्तामहे. We are now continuing the series of talks on the play Mudrarakshasa of Vishakadatta. We were halfway through the third act, and the context in which we left was one wherein the bards have praised Chandragupta can I continue? Okay. The bards have praised Chandragupta, and it is as though at the cost of Chanakya. It is certainly belittling Chanakya's prowess and intelligence, and ensuring that Chandragupta asserts himself. So, by speaking in a somewhat taunting manner. And so, one of the bards says that it is not through the ornaments and the royal insignia that a king comes to be called a king or be recognized as the king or actually be a king. So, bhushanadhyupayogena upabhogena prabhurbhavati na prabhu. Prabhuhu na bhavati. The Lord does not become a Lord. The king does not become a king by merely putting on the ornaments that kings are usually want to put on. As we saw in the last time, even in the enactment of a drama or in a cinema, also the actor puts on the ornaments that are due to a king. And on that very account, he cannot claim to be a king, and therefore the mere dress does not vest him with the authority. We have seen, for example, even in today's newspapers, we see that a group of people, thugs actually, have come in the guise of police and have looted some house in a village or whatever. So that way, the mere wear of a king, the mere royal raiment and ornaments would not make a person a king, and therefore parair aparibhutagnyah tvamiva prabhuruchyate. It's only insofar as the words of the person are not overruled by others. So it's only to that extent that he can be called a king, and therefore that bard wants to say that Chandragupta is a king only insofar as his words are not, his commandments are not countermanded. So they are not undone and nullified. And Chanakya, who is hearing the praises of the bards, first thinks that the words of the first bard were actually words in praise of the Lord. So our poets are they are given to praising the king and the Lord by making use of convenient epithets, so which can be applicable to both. And this has the semblance of such a praise of Chandragupta, but then the words in the second bard are very clearly indicative of something else, and therefore Chanakya he gives thought to this and vichintya. So on second thought, upon further thought, aha jnatam rakshasasya ayam prayogaha. So this is surely the machination of this rakshasa. And to himself he says, Duratman rakshasa drishyase. I am able to see you. So that is, see through what you are doing. Bhoho jagrati khalu Kautilya. So Kautilya is ever awake. So vigilance never departs from Chanakya, especially in politics, especially in regard to the issue of the safety of the country. Vigilance becomes very important. There is a beautiful saying which says, eternal vigilance is the price of freedom. So, the hard earned freedom will be lost easily. So, if we are careless, if we lose our vigilance, and therefore those who want to guard their freedom must be constantly vigilant. And here, Chanakya says that he is ever on the vigil and he cannot be hoodwinked by Rakshasa. And therefore, he says, Jagrati khalu Kautilyaha. And then the king is naturally pleased with the praise of the bards, and he says some worthy gift is to be given away to the bards. So he commands his chamberlain, Vaihinari. So Abhyam Vaitalika Suvarna Shata Sahasram Dapayam. So give them 100,000 golden coins for these apt words of praise. So Kanchikiya says yes and is about to depart. By when Chanakya stops him angrily, he says, Vaihinare, Tishtha Nagantavyam. So do not go. And accosting Chandragupta, he says, Vrishala, kimayam asthane mahanrathotsargaha. So what is it that you are spending your money on? And a large sum at that. So small decisions you may take, but it is a major sum, it should be appropriately spent. And if such large sums are spent on mere barbs, that is a national waste. So it is an abuse of the treasury. So this must be prevented. And therefore, Chanakya says that you are inappropriate in spending your money. And therefore, asthana means inappropriate place. So you're spending riches for unworthy causes. And then the king gets angry. He says, if I am being blocked and prevented at every step, then this kingdom is no kingdom for me. Na rajyamiva. All it is only like a shackle for me. Bandhanamiva rajyam. So the kingdom is but a fetter and a shackle, and it is not a kingdom at all. In the eyes of the ordinary people, a kingdom is a place. So being a king, so is one where one enjoys the most. So it is considered equivalent to the very height of enjoyment. And on the other hand, if he is thwarting every command of Chandragupta, then if Chanakya is doing like that, then Chandragupta certainly doesn't feel the freedom and joy of having been the ruler of a vast kingdom. And then the retort of Chanakya is that this is the problem with those who do not address the problems themselves. You are evading major issues and you are paying attention to trivial issues. So this is the problem with all those kings who vest only their ministers with all authority and with the duty of handling the kingdom. Swayam anabhiyuktanam, those who do not address the problems themselves. Prajnam ete doshaha sambhavanti. Now, such problematic situations arise in the case of such kings who do not address the problems themselves and, on the other hand, transfer the burden to the ministers. And therefore, if you do not like my interference, if you do not like my advice, then why don't you engage in your problems yourself? And as was planned, the king says, Ete vayam swayam swakarmani abhiyajyamahe. So henceforth, I will engage myself in the problems that I have to face. So in my duties and tasks, so I shall engage myself. I no more need your services and so on. And Chanakya says, I am only very happy because he was carrying a very big burden of administering the kingdom. He says, Vayopi Swakarmani bhijyamahi. Okay, I too shall mind my own business. So henceforth, you cannot expect that me to keep advising you at each and every step. The king does not stop at that. The quarrel could have ended there. Now, the king wants to take Chanakya to task and says, what is it for that you blocked Kaumudi Mahotsava, this celebration that I had ordered? And Chanakya um, puts a counter question. Instead of answering the question, he asks, what on earth would be the use of this celebration? Kaumudi Mahotsava Anushtanasya kim prayojanam? Ityahamapi shrotim ichhami. I too want to know. I too demand an answer for this question. And Chandragupta says, as there is a saying in English, the king's word is law. So, first and foremost of all, that my command is being carried out is the very purpose of Kaumudi Mahotsava. And Chanakya retorts saying, it is exactly to vanquish the carrying out of your command that was the primary purpose. Mamapi tavagnya vyaghata eva Kaumudi Mahotsava pratishedasya prathamam prayojanam. That is the first and foremost use of my blocking this celebration of Kaumudi Mahotsava, because I did intend to block your command being carried out. So, the words of Chanakya are not couched in words of courtesy. On the other hand, open defiance is very well reflected in the words of Chanakya. And Chanakya says, well, your commands are carried out by kings all over, but then let them also know that there is a limit for your rules and rulings, because when it comes to me, your commands do not work. So they are contained by my power. And there are further uses also. And if you want, I can explain to them. And the king says, okay, speak out. What are the other purposes of your stopping this Kaumudi Mahotsava? And then Chanakya immediately summons records. He is a person who would speak with documents and proofs, and therefore you can see in this context the tightness of the arguments and counter arguments, and the seriousness of the situation, or accusations and counter accusations and calling for evidence and providing proof and so on. So Chanakya summons through his portress, Shromatara, ask Mr. Achala, who is the Kayastha, who is the chief accountant, to get the files of Bhadra Bhatta and others. Now, these are the persons who have deserted Chandragupta and have gone and joined Malayaketu, the rival camp. So she goes and brings all the records, and Chanakya reads out those files and says, Shretam, listen. And Chandragupta says, yes, I am attentive. Dattavadhanosmi. So you can see how things, when they get formal and a bit bitter, the kind of conversations that take place. So then Chanakya begins to read out. There are a few persons who rose along with Chandragupta and Chanakya against the Nandas. So they are called Sahothais. So they also rose in revolt against the administration of the Nandas. And now they have gone to the opposite camp of Malayaketu. Actually, we planned to kill Malayaketu. So he has now become our enemy, and these people he reads out a big list of some 8 people who have shifted their loyalties from Chandragupta to Malayaketu. And he says, now here is documentary evidence. So, Pramana Lekha Patram idam. So, number one is Mr. Bhadra Bhatta, so who is in charge of the elephant force. Number two, Purushadatta, in charge of the cavalry, Ashwadhyaksha. The first one is Gajadhyaksha. And then there is this person by name Dingarata. And he is the sister son of Chandrabhanu, who was the um, main doorkeeper. And then, so person closely related to the security. And then there was this person, number four, by name Balagupta, who was the person who took care of the king when he was but a child. So Sojana Gandhi, Sojana Gandhi means a close relative. And it is this Rajasena who served Chandragupta when he was a child. So this is number five. And then number six is Bhagurayana. Now he is the younger brother of Simhabala, and that Simhabala is the commander in chief. So people occupying some key positions and relatives of persons in key posts are all involved in this. And then number seven is Rohitaksha, the Malava prince, and then Vijayavarma, who is also an important leader of the Kshatriya clan there. And then now the king is not satisfied with mere reading out names and their positions or relations, etc. And he says, what made them uh, lose their loyalty towards us? Etesham aparaga hetun vijñatim ichhami. So, in what way were they to get disaffected by us? So, how did they get disaffected? How did they shift their loyalty? So, Chanakya says, Vrishala Shweta. Now, as regards this Gajadhyaksha and Ashwadhyaksha, Bhadrapata and Purushadatta, Taukalu Stri Madhya Mragaya Shilav. So they had their addictions of Stri, addicted to women, addicted to drinking, addicted to hunting. Now, all these, when they are in within certain reasonable limits, they are fine. But once they cross these limits, these can become dangerous addictions. And then, as a consequence, he says, the two grew careless regarding their respective posts, and therefore they were dethroned. So, Anabhiyuktau, and therefore they removed from their office, and then they were only given some amount of subsistence. So, Swajivana Matrena was Thapitau. And what these two persons did was to go to the opposite camp and hold those very offices that they held here. So this Bhadrapata, he went there and he became the person in charge of the elephants, and then this Purushadatta became Ashwadhyaksha there, and so on. So they have shifted to the enemy camp. And then, as regards this Dingarata and Balagupta, these two persons were known for their extreme greed, and the salary that you paid, they thought it was too small for them, and therefore they thought that they can get much more in the employ of Malayaketu, and therefore they have shifted their loyalty from here to there. And as regards Rajasena, who is Kumara Sevaka for you, that is, who served you when you were a child, so you showed your grace upon, showered your grace upon him, and therefore he had amassed a good deal of riches, and therefore he developed a fear that one day or the other, all the wealth that he had acquired may be taken away from him, and therefore he thought that Malayaketu would be a safer place for him to go and stay, and therefore he has deserted us. And then this Bhagurayana, the younger brother of Simhabala, the commander-in-chief, so he too, in course of time, developed friendship, developed friendship with Malaya Ketu, with Parvataka, and then um, he developed friendship with Malaya Ketu also, and he told Malaya Ketu that your father, Parvataka, was killed by Chanakya, Pitate Chanakyena Vyapaditaha, and creating that fear in his mind. So he took away Malaya Ketu. So, and then uh, the persons like Chandanadasa and others, so when they were arrested, uh, so this person went to Malayaketu. And then Malayaketu himself thought that uh, he was the Pranarakshaka, and therefore for Chandanadasa, who was about to be put to death, and therefore this person was given the place of the minister there. And then as regards Rohitaksha and Vijayavarma, they were persons who were too full of pride, too full of themselves, ati manitvat. And uh, as the pay that was given to their own relatives was much more than was given to these persons, they grew very angry and they went to Malayaketu. Now, these are the causes for their losing their loyalty towards us, and this is the cause of the disaffection among these persons. And the king comes the counter question: if it was very clearly known that these people are disaffected towards us, why was no proper action taken quickly? Because one has to nip in the bud the growth of the enemy, and if there is a delay in doing that, then there can be quite a bit of a problem. There is a saying in Sanskrit which says that there are some 3 or 4 things which must be nipped in the bud and must be destroyed completely so that nothing of it remains. So they are Vyadhishesha, and then Rinashesha, Shatrushesha, and so on. So they must first of all be never allowed to grow, and finally not a trace of it should be left behind, and therefore that must be destroyed completely. And why did he not take action against them? So he's demanding of Chanakya, because Chanakya it was who used to take decisions for Chandragupta. Then it was the bounden duty of Chanakya to take action against them and to see that right action was taken against them at the right moment. So um, why was no action taken? Chanakya says, well, it was not possible to take any action against them. And the king puts him this question: is it because of your tactlessness, Kim Akaushalat, or is there some private axe to grind for you? So, were you to stand in some benefit by protecting them thus and seeing to it that they were not punished, but on the other hand, they were helped to run away or some such thing? So, is it because of some private purpose for yourself? So, Kim Uta Prayojana Apekshaya. Chanakya says, Katham Akaushala Bhavishyati. How can there be tactlessness on my part? It was for some specific purposes and goals alone that they were allowed to escape. And the king demands, what was that prayojana for which they were let go? Chanakya says, listen and understand. So obviously, the taunt in the words of Chanakya is very evident. But you must see the very logical and systematic way of thinking of Chanakya and how he has taken every one of his decisions in a very proper manner after due thought. So he says, in the case of those who have developed disloyalty, there are only 2 ways of handling them. Dividham Pratividhanam. One is Anugraha, another is Nigraha. So the countermeasure can be by showing favor, and or the other way is imparting some punishment. It's only in these 2 ways that it can be done. Now, in the case of first he lists out how doing any favor to Bhadrabhata and others, these 8 persons, would not in any way be helpful. And after exhausting the 8 cases, he takes up the 8 cases again and says, even Nigraha will not do in these cases. So he explains the reasons for them. Now, in the case of Bhadrabhata and Purushadatta, what would be Anugraha? So, showing them some favor, it would be reinstatement of their position. So, one as Hastyadhyaksha and the other as Shvadhyaksha. And if these two persons are reinstated in their positions of Gajadhyaksha and Shvadhyaksha, so what would that lead to? In the case of such persons, Vyasana Yogad Anabhikteshu Punararopyamanaha Sakalameva Rajyasya Moolam Hastyashvam Avasade. Know, Mr. Chandragupta, that the Hasti Bala, that is Gajabala and Ashwabala, are the most important strengths of a king. And if in these two very highly important positions, people who are addicted to certain um, unbecoming things are occupying, then that is going to be detrimental to the very kingdom. And in the case of Dingaratha and Balagupta, they were known to be so greedy that even if you had offered them the entire kingdom, they would not have been satisfied at all. Now, in what way can such people be favored? That is once again impossible. Rajasena and Bhagrayana, they were afraid of losing the riches that they had acquired. And therefore, how can you show them some favor and then retain them? And in the case of Rohitaksha and Vijayavarma, they were incapable of putting up with the riches and enhancement of the position of their own kith and kin, and therefore um, it is impossible to say that showing them some favors will make them more loving towards the king and then becoming more loyal to the king and so on. So he lists out all the 8, so pointing out how any amount of favor shown to them would not help. And the second question is doing some nigraha, so giving them some punishment, showing them their place and um, punishing them, so either putting in jail or whatever. And he says even that would not be very easy, because now think of the impact it can make upon the citizens, because people have the impression that they were the persons who were with us when you rose in revolt against the Nandas. And therefore, if some of the important persons who played their part in that revolt are punished very severely, Ugrena Dandena, so then the people who were loyal to Nandakula, they will, in their eyes, we will become very small and not trustworthy. So obviously, a section of the people still have their loyalty to Nandas, but it's only if and when Chanakya and Chandragupta show that they are carrying out the administration in a righteous manner that they can shift their loyalty towards these people, towards the new rulers. But otherwise, uh, in the fit of their loyalty to the previous king, they will definitely be angry, and that will be we will be losing the sympathy of the citizens there. And then now we can see that Malayaketu has become a very clear enemy towards us. He has developed enmity, and he has surrounded himself with Mlechabala. So, and he wants to attack us, and therefore, against this background, this Kaumudi Mahotsava needs to be banned, because this is the time when we have to exert ourselves for the protection of the kingdom and securing our situation much more than this kind of celebration. And therefore he says, Soyam Vyayama Kalaha, na Utsava Kalaha. This is not a time for celebration. And this is when we have to work hard to see that we fortify ourselves. And he says, right now the immediate task that was to be done was Durga Samskara, that is strengthening the fort and the repair of the fort that was due. And when that was to be prarabdhavi, when that has to be commenced, so Kim Kaumudi Mahotsava, what's the point in this celebration called Kaumudi Mahotsava? And therefore I have prohibited that. And the king is not able to uh, give a satisfactory reply to this. And he says, well, I have much more to investigate in this, Bahu Prashtavyam. So, and Chanakya says, you are free to ask any question. So, Vishabdham Pricha. And I have much more to tell also. Mamapi Bahu Akheyam. Atra. And then um, the king asks another vital question now. Now, the person who is the root cause of all this disaster is Malayaketu. And why was he allowed to escape? So he should have been blocked and put to jail. And then Chanakya says, well, if you say that he should not have been neglected, then we have only two possibilities in front of us. So you can see the beautiful binaries he says that are possible. So the earlier one was one of Anugraha or Nigraha. And now he says, either there must be Nigraha, Nigrahetava, or the other one was Pratishrutam Rajyardham. So the promised half kingdom was to be given to him. In neither case would be at peace. So, because if we punish him, what happens is already people have a suspicion that it's us that have killed Parvataka, his father, and then if we punish this person, Malayaketu, then people are bound to conclude that we are extremely ungrateful. And even if, on the other hand, we promised the half the kingdom to him, and then if we were to hand over half the kingdom to him, then that will be undoing what we have accomplished so far, and therefore that way also we will be put at a disadvantage. And therefore, the best thing was that Malayaketu is out of the kingdom, and therefore he was allowed to escape. And then he puts this question, why in that case was Rakshasa neglected? So why was no action taken against Rakshasa? And then Chanakya says, the first point that you must know is that Rakshasa has a very high loyalty to his master. Swamini Sthiranuragitvat. And then when he has been, reason number two is, he has been living here for a long time, and therefore he knows so many people who are loyal to Nanda, and then they trust him extremely, and therefore he is further endowed with the twin qualities of Prajna and Purushakara. So high political wisdom, and then the energy to put into action what his wisdom tells him. And therefore he also has a good amount of wealth, and if he was to continue here in this very city, then a great deal of antahkopa among citizens would be generated. So citizens would get to be very angry with us and in very large numbers, and that would be a very difficult problem to handle. On the other hand, if he is at a distance, Duri Kritastu, so if he has gone away to a distant land, and even though he is able to generate some anger in the mind of the people, so it is Bahya Kopa, so even then, it is possible to somehow bring him round. Kathamapi upayayi vashayitum shakyaha. And therefore, he must first be removed from here like a dart which is stuck in the heart. So, hridayasyaha shankuhu iva. So, he must be udhritya durikritaha. So, pulled out and kept at a distance. The king now asked him, so why was he not attacked and held in, see, held captive? Chanakya says, remember Chandragupta that he is a Rakshasa, Rakshasa Kalvasau. So there is an apparent play on words that he is not an ordinary person. And suppose you had attacked Chanakya, what would have been the consequence? You must give thought to that. So, as he is also a person with both prajna and parakrama, so he would have certainly launched a counter offensive, and we would have lost a good deal of our own forces. So, Ishmat Balani Bahuni Vinashayet, or being the other choice is that he may die. So, Swayamva Vinashayet. Now, both would be big losses for us. So, um, if he were to be alive, then it would be somehow possible to bring him round. But otherwise, so in either case, there will be a great deal of destruction on our part. So, upon our own forces, and on the other hand, we would also be losing an eminent person like this Rakshasa. Chanakya, to these words of Chanakya, Chandragupta says, well, I cannot surpass you in your speech. So you are undoubtedly a master of speech. Um, I would rather think that the person to be praised in this context is rather Rakshasa himself. Rakshasa eva atra prashasyataraha. And now this irritates and infuriates Chanakya, and he says, uh, and you mean by implication, not you. So, na bhavan iti vakyasheshaha. So, it's implied that it is not Chanakya who is to be uh, appreciated here, but on the other hand, it is Rakshasa. So, angrily and in a rhetorical manner, so he challenges the uh, words of the king. And he asks him plainly, Bho Vrishala, tena kim kritam, what did he do after all? And then Chandragupta says, you want to know what Rakshasa achieved? Listen. So this great man, so he's referring to Rakshasa as a great man. So obviously this is all very well planned. And when he praises Rakshasa much and despises Chanakya in front of others, had this quarrel of between Chanakya and Chandragupta been utterly private, this would have been a different matter. Now here is the Kanchikiya, here is that Pratihari, and here are the barbs, and in front of them all, there is a great embarrassment, and Chanakya is insulted, and Rakshasa is praised, and all this is going to cause a good deal of embarrassment. It is not that this scandal will not spread among people, and therefore everyone is bound to believe that there is some serious rift between Chanakya and Chandragupta. So when Chandragupta praises Rakshasa, Chanakya says, so think tena king kritam, what is it that he has achieved? And then Chandragupta says, if you don't know, hear from me, idin ajnayate shruyatam. That great man, so he calls him a Mahatma, and says, uh, when we fought and got this city, got hold of this city, Amartya began to um, set his foot upon our neck. That is, he would pressurize us, and then he stayed here for as long as he would choose to. And uh, he saw to it that for our own forces, even the Jaya Ghoshana was curtailed and contained. And he has also spelt a great deal of disaster upon all of us, to the extent that we do not know now whom to trust and whom not to trust. And therefore, even in regard to persons who can be considered worthy of trust, there are shadows of doubts, and we are not able to take decisions. And therefore, all this has been wrought by Rakshasa, and we are nothing in front of him. So this taunt cannot be borne with by Chanakya, and he says, "Idat kritam Rakshasena." So you mean to say all this was done by Chanakya, by this Rakshasa? And he also says, after all, this is all that is done by Rakshasa. I thought, just as I dethroned the Nandas and killed them and established you over the throne, he was doing something to dethrone you and establish Mariketu, as though it is as though that he had already achieved that. So, after all, this is what is achieved by Rakshasa. Now the king says, why do you say I achieved? This was done by somebody else, not by you. So what role did you have to play in this? Chanakya gets extremely furious with this because all that Chanakya had done so far was now nullified by just one sentence of Chandragupta saying, after all, what have you done? Others did this and it's not you. So don't try to uh, own this and impute this to upon yourself. And this is not something done by you. Chanakya says, hey, Matsarin, you malicious fellow. And he says, even as Rakshasa was looking on, I destroyed all the Nandas one by one like Pashus. So they were killed like animals. So these Nandas had at their command uh, 100 crores. So many gold coins that they had. So in spite of all that money, all that position and wealth and power, so and even while Rakshasa was their minister, ever vigilant, so in spite of it, so I destroyed all the 9 Nandas the like killing of animals. And he says those fires are uh, uh, even now blazing, the fires that destroyed the Nandas. And the consequences. So, how does the slaying of the 9 Nandas look? Now, look at the sky. Even now, the vultures are hovering in the sky. So, with their steady and motionless wings, and the smoke that arose from the destruction of the enemy force is now like a very cloud, and it is eclipsing the sun, and the the various beings in the cemeteries, they are mightily pleased because um, so many people have been killed. The Nandas and others have been killed, and um, even now those fires are blazing. So Chanakya speaks of his own great accomplishments, and Chandragupta repeats the same thing. These were not accomplished by you, sir. It is accomplished by somebody else. Anena eva idam anushtitam. Chanakya says, who then it is? And he says, Chandragupta says, it is fate. Fate was uh, contrary to the Navanandas, and therefore Nandakula Vidveshina Daivena. Chanakya gets supremely angry. He says, Daivam avidvamsa pramanayanti. It is only the ignorant that regard destiny as the supreme authority. So it is only they who attribute to fate and to destiny all their accomplishments or even their failures. And the king, in his retort, he says, Vidvamsopya vikthanaha bhavanti. You spoke of avidvamsa, let me speak of vidvamsa. So the knowledgeable ones are ones who would never boast about their own achievements. Avikathana means one who is never given to bragging about himself. And therefore, if you are bragging so much about yourself, saying, I did this, I did that, and so on, then you cease to be a Vidwan also. A true Vidwan never boasts of his own achievements. Now Chanakya becomes supremely angry and he says, uh, you want to boss over me as though you are bossing over a servant? So Bhrityam ivamam arudham ichhasi. And therefore he says, my hands are once again now to getting ready to loosen the tuft of hair. So Chanakya had loosened his tuft when he took his vow of destroying the Nandas, and it's only subsequent to their destruction that he tied his tuft again, and he says, "Now my hands are rushing towards my shikha to loosen it and take the woe again, and then in order to take my oath of destroying you, so my feet are proceeding to stamp upon the earth, and then um, my the fire of my anger had as though quelled consequent to the destruction of the Nandas, and it is as though you are invoking that fire once again. So, um, because you are yourself getting close to death, I suppose. Now, at this point, the king is full of tension and emotion, Savegam, and he says, indeed, Chanakya looks like he is indeed angry. So, Satyameva Kupitaha Aryaha. So, could it be that Chanakya is really angry? So the enactment is so fine, so well done, that even Chandragupta gets the doubt that Chanakya must probably be really angry rather than merely feigning anger. He must have got really angry. And he says, he is stamping his foot upon the earth, and I don't know how the earth is able to bear his stamping on the foot. And his Raudra is like that of Rudra. So when Rudra shows Raudra, so how furious it should be uh, during his Tandava. So Manye Rudrasya Raudram Rasam Abhinayatas Tandaveshu Smarantyaha, and so on. And his eyes literally seem to be blazing forth, and then uh, his pair of eyebrows appear like smoke issuing from that fire uh, uh, exuded by his eyes, which have turned tawny. So um, the anger of Chanakya seems so very real. And then Chanakya also says, now he withdraws his anger. So those words of Chandragupta were his swagata, atmagatam, so to himself. And Chanakya now wants to call it a day and says, Vrishala, Vrishala, Alamuttaruttarena. So no more replies and rejoinders. So if you deem that Rakshasa is superior to me, here I am resigning from my post. So he throws the dagger that is the sword that is the mark of his high position, and throws it, Shastram Utsrijya, Uthaya, and Akashe Lakshmi Padhva Sogatam, and addressing the Rakshasa to himself. So, okay, Rakshasa, now this is the achievement that you have made through your wit. So, you want to outwit me. Kautilya buddhi vijigishoho tava buddhehe prakarshaha. And you think that uh, Chandragupta has now his loyalty getting shifted and slackened from Chanakya. Chanakyatas chilita bhaktim. So, and such a Chandragupta would be very easy to conquer. So, this is what you are thinking. And this Bhedopaya is going to tell upon you, O Chanakya, O Rakshasa. So, iti nishkrantaha. So, exit Chanakya in that angry mood. And now the king and the Kanchikiya are left. So, on the stage, and he addresses the Kanchikiya. So, um, please make it known to the citizens there, the VIPs, that henceforth it is Chandragupta who is going to take all the decisions. He is going to administer the kingdom. Chandragupta swayameva rajyam karishyati, anadrite Chanakyam. So disregarding Chanakya. So let this be made known to the citizens. And the Kanchikiya now expresses wonder. How come Chandragupta is referring to Chanakya without his title? There was never an occasion when Chandragupta referred to Chanakya as mere Chanakya. He would always refer to him as Arya Chanakya. And the moment Chanakya left the stage, so Chandragupta says, Anadritya Chanakyam, disregarding Chanakya, here and henceforth, I am going to administer the kingdom. And therefore, Nirupapadameva Chanakyam iti, without the proper title, Arya, to Chanakya. So instead of saying Arya Chanakya, he's referring to him as only Chanakya. So, oh, the moment a person's power is taken away, how small he becomes. Hanta sangrihitaha adhikaraha. Okay, in a way, we cannot say that Chandragupta is totally at fault here, because if a king does something bad, it is indeed the fault of the minister. Saha doshaha sachivasyaiva yat asat kurute nripaha. And if a gaja comes to be branded as a vyala, both the words mean the elephant only, but an elephant in rogue, so a rogue elephant is called vyala. So the elephant in rut who goes uncontrolled and so on. And therefore, if a gaja becomes a vyala, it is indeed the fault of the mahout. So who has to control the elephant? And therefore, I would say that rather than calling this all a blunder of Chandragupta, it's all a mistake of Chanakya. And while he was thinking so when a person has some thought in his mind, he would stand still and his gaze is turned somewhere and so on. The king notices this and says, Arya, kim vicharis? What are you thinking? And the Kanchikya says, oh, nothing, sir. So I was just thinking that the king has now become a true king. So, Dishtya, luckily, Devaha idanim Devaha samvrittaha. So, the usual refers to the king as Deva. So, now we have indeed become a Deva. So, a true king that you are. Now, you can see that the net effect is the word of the bard. So, he says, the Prabhu is no Prabhu by mere ornaments and so on. So, it is only when his ajna is fulfilled. And even so, here, it's as though, ironically, those words have proved true, and the Chandragupta Deva has now become a real Deva, so a real king, and that is what I was thinking. So saying, the Kanchiki also exits, and the king now is alone on the stage, so uttering a few words for himself, and he says, well, I am now being taken thus, it is to say, mistaken thus, which is to say that he is defying Chanakya. So that is the impression that people are going to gather on account of this episode. And may Arya, that is Arya Chanakya, be gratified. So he wants to achieve something with this Kapata Kalaha. Okay, let me hope that he will achieve what he wanted to. So, which is to say that in his Sogata, he has not really lost his high regard for Chanakya, and this is only a sort of a drama that was done to confuse the Rakshasa camp, and therefore his regard for Chanakya is there intact. And however, when he speaks aloud, he addresses Shanotra, the Pratihari, and says, I have really got headache now with all these useless quarrel, Shushka Kalaha, so pointless quarrel, and therefore Shiro Vedana Mam Padhate, Shayana Griham Adesha, lead me to my bedroom, I would like to go and sleep. And the Pratihari shows him the way, and within himself, the king says to himself, it is only upon the command of Arya Chanakya that I behaved like this. So Chanakya had asked him to behave like this. So, and even then, even though this was only a pretended anger against my Guru Chanakya, I feel so ashamed and so guilty that I feel like if the earth opens itself, I would gladly enter. So I would like to die the way. But I just cannot imagine people who indeed truly offend their gurus ye satyameva hi guron atipatayanti. So they violate and see this insult their gurus. Tesham katham nu hridayam na bhinatti lajja. How doesn't shame break their heart? Which is to say, being loyal to one's true guru is the greatest thing, and even to pretend uh, violence against that, even to pretend disloyalty to one's own guru, defying his words. So he is unthinkable. So I did all this for mere drama. So this is all pre-planned and was only staged to confuse the opposite camp. So Chandragupta is not fully in the know of why Chanakya did all this, but he had arranged this to be done. And um, when I did this only for the sake of drama, so even then I feel so hurt myself and feel so bad and about myself, so guilty about myself. What then to say of people who truly defy their own gurus? So, with this comes to an end the third act of the play. So, this act has been uh, very beautifully entitled as Kapata Kalaha or Kritaka Kalaha. So, uh, between Chandragupta and Chanakya. In fact, there is one more act in which this word occurs, and that is Kutalekha. So, uh, the fifth act is called Kutalekha, wherein there is a, a false document, a forged document, so which wreaks havoc. So, which is that which destroys the unity between Rakshasa and Malayaketu on the one hand, and Malayaketu and all the Mlecha kings that were uh, aligned to him. So, in just a matter of a few days, and without shedding a drop of blood, how Chanakya is able to dismantle the entire vast enemy force and is able to ensure that once again, see, Chandragupta is in his safe hands by making Rakshasa his king is the great achievement of Chanakya in this play. So, in our next session, we will be taking up the fourth act. Namaskar, everybody.